conferences for pastors. And while we went, these were some of the local inhabitants that we came across. Shortly after we saw these fellows, we had this view. Indonesia is a gorgeous country, especially in North Sumatra, which is where we held our conference. I should have pointed that out when we were back on that Indonesian slide, but North Sumatra is way over to the northwest of the country of Indonesia. And so this is a view of the second largest volcanic lake in the world. And here you see us going across the lake to where we were going to visit some places where we thought we would hold our conference. Notice the luxury seats in the yacht that we took. It's a gorgeous country, but it's not a wealthy country at all. People are pretty poor, which you'll see later on. And, you know, we get to the hotel, kind of indicates the level of luxury at which we conducted our conference. This is the place that we eventually chose to teach the pastors who came to our first conference in Indonesia, which was held just this last fall in November. One of the places, this was one of the cabins, or one of the, I don't know what you call it, dormitories that we stayed in. Notice how lush the vegetation is. As I said, a beautiful place, but the conditions were pretty spartan. Here you see a view that I witnessed as I walked up the hill of the conference center where we met this last year in November, and saw this church. That is a member church of what they call the HKBP, which is short for the Church Christian Batak Protestant. That's how they put it. We would say the Batak Christian Protestant Church. Please note that the word Lutheran is in quotes. Okay? I'm going to explain why. But just for the time being, 5 million Lutherans in Indonesia. Okay, in North America, 8 million. In Indonesia, 5 million. Interesting, right? 12 Lutheran churches in Indonesia. You probably know of 3. Most of you would know of 3 in this country, right? Missouri Synod, the ELCA, although I don't know if you can still call that Lutheran. The Wisconsin Lutheran Synod, right? Evangelical Lutheran Synod, and then a few other smaller Lutheran churches. 12 in Indonesia. These Lutheran churches in Indonesia were founded by what we call union missionaries. And I'd like to spend actually quite a bit of time talking about what that means. Because I think in order for you to understand how important it is for us to go to Indonesia, I need to do that. So I'm going to talk about what is known as the Prussian Union. And you know something about Reformation history, right? What year did Luther post the 95 Theses on the church of on the door of the Castle Church in Wittenberg? What year? 1517, right. In 1612, all of Prussia was Lutheran, except a small minority of Calvinists. And in 1612, the ruler of the Prussian kingdom was a man named Johann Sigismund, and he converted to Calvinism. For the next 200 years, there was a division between the Christians in Prussia. The majority were still Lutheran, but the rulers were Calvinists, and a small minority of the people were Calvinists. In 1830, the ruler of Prussia was a man named Friedrich Wilhelm III. He decided, for political reasons, that it would be better for Prussia if there were only one church. Prussia had recently been conquered by Napoleon, and finally Napoleon's forces were run out of Prussia, and Friedrich Wilhelm III was absolutely persuaded this would never happen again, that Prussia would be invaded. And he believed that the church needed to be united in order for the people to be more united to stand against political foes in the future. So he mandated that the Lutherans and the Reformed use the same agenda, and also that they be admitted to each other's altars to receive the Lord's Supper. And he enforced it with the military. There were a number of pastors who refused to cooperate. They were defrocked. There were a number of lay people who made their farms available for private Lutheran worship services. So they weren't combined, but just Lutheran. They had their properties confiscated, many of them. This is why a number of Prussians immigrated to the United States in the mid-1800s. And they became the founders of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, together with a group of Saxons and another group of Bavarians. But the most severely persecuted of all those who formed our church body back in 1847 were the Prussians. They were not permitted to worship according to their conscience. Now, why didn't they just capitulate? I'd like to talk about that for a few minutes. And I will be undergirding or supporting the teaching that I'm sure you've heard from Pastor Breel more than once. When you go to the Lord's Supper, as many of you already have this morning, and some of you will in the next service, many of you will in the next service, do you receive bread and wine? Yes, if you're a Lutheran, of course, you acknowledge you receive bread and wine. What is the bread? It's the body of Jesus. What is the wine? It is the blood of Jesus. Now, what Friedrich Wilhelm III did was he forced people to receive the Lord's Supper together who had completely different views on the Lord's Supper. I don't know how many Reformed friends you have, and if you talk to them about doctrine at all, but the Reformed deny that the bread is Jesus' body and that the wine is his blood. Is this simply a different interpretation? You know, they have their interpretation, we have ours? No. Jesus' words are very clear. Anybody can understand it. This is my body. He doesn't say this symbolizes my body, this signifies my body, this represents my body, this is like my body. This is my body. And he is the Son of God. He is the second person of the Trinity. If anybody can speak in clear Aramaic and can be translated into clear Greek, it's the Son of God. We all know what he said. This is my body. But the Reformed reject this. Now, what's the problem if you don't believe that you receive the body and blood of Jesus in the Lord's Supper? What's the real problem? The main problem is not that you're calling God a liar. That's pretty serious. But there's a much bigger problem. What is it? Well, for what purpose was his body crucified? To bring us the forgiveness of sins, right? For what purpose was his blood shed? To bring us the forgiveness of sins, right? So when you deny that you're receiving his body and blood in the Lord's Supper, what do you deny to yourself? The benefits that his body and blood are meant to bring to you in the Lord's Supper, right? The forgiveness of sins, as all of those who went to the early service heard, right? And you'll hear in the late service later. And where there is forgiveness of sins, there is also life and salvation. So when you deny that the bread is Jesus' body and the wine is his blood, you deny to yourself all the benefits that Jesus gives in the Lord's Supper. You deny your entire inheritance as it is offered to you in the Lord's Supper. So it is not just a minor difference of opinion we have here as to what's going on. The Lutherans, many of them, were absolutely unwilling to do this. And that is why they were persecuted and ended up emigrating to this country. Many of those who stayed capitulated